In this lesson, we're going to discuss some important concepts that will help you create better seamless textures. So what is a seamless texture? A seamless texture is an image that can be tiled or repeated multiple times without being able to tell where it begins or where it ends. Now, seamless textures are going to be really helpful when creating textures for large and expansive objects like terrain. Now, whenever you're creating your own seamless textures, it's best to go out and take your own photos when doing so. Now, there are two reasons that you would want to take your own photos. The first reason would be you can avoid any copyrights and license agreements. It's easy to go out and to find websites that offer free textures that you can use, but you need to make sure that you read the license agreements carefully, because you could fall into an area where you're infringing on that license agreement and you could get into some trouble. Now, the second reason that you would want to take your own photos is you can go out and get exactly what you want and what you need. Now, you could spend a little bit of time taking your photos, but you could spend even more time searching the internet trying to find the right image that you're looking for. So why not just go out and take your own photos? Now, whenever you're taking your own photos, there's two things that you need to keep in mind for creating seamless textures. The two things are lighting and angle. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is good lighting. So let's take a look at an example of bad lighting first. So here you can see that we've taken an image of a brick wall here, but it's got terrible lighting on it. You can see that we have very dark edges, and then we have this bright area on our brick wall. And this is going to create an inconsistency in the texture, no matter how well we get the brick texture pattern matched up here. So let's take a look at this image tiled. Here you can see that we have the brick patterns lined up perfectly, but we can still see those seams because of the variation in color. And you'll also notice that we just have this very hot spot here, and that's just not going to look all that great on a brick wall. All right, so what we need to do is create a texture or take a photo with consistent lighting. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So here you can see that we have another brick wall with consistent lighting, and you'll notice that it's consistent from left to right and bottom to top. Okay, so here we can actually go in and we could create a tiled texture or a seamless texture multiple times, and we wouldn't be able to tell where that seam is because of the lighting consistency. So let's take a look at this image tiled. Now here, this has been tiled 2 by 2 as well, and you really can't see where the seams are. Now you could get a good example or get a good idea of where the seams are based on the brick shape itself. So you can see this one here looks exactly like this one, so you know that this image has been tiled. Now, another thing that we'll have to worry about whenever we are taking our own photos is going to be the angle in which we take those photos. So let's take a look at our first example of a bad angle. So you'll see here that this is a terrible angle to take a photo of a brick wall. First off, it's way too close, and really that's the main problem here. This could be an example of someone trying to get a lot of detail in their image, but they're just very, very close, and we really can't even tell what this is supposed to be a texture of. So this is not going to work. Another angle that's going to be bad is something like this. Now we're kind of looking down at the wall, and we're not exactly at the right angle here. And we're looking down at it, and what this creates is larger bricks here at the top and then smaller at the bottom. Now we might be able to take this into Photoshop and skew it and work with it a little bit, but that creates a lot of work. So it's just easier to go ahead and retake the photo the correct way. Now another bad example would be this. Now the problem with this is that it's also angled the wrong way, but it's also turned a little bit. So you can see that the camera has been placed where it's kind of looking down this brick wall, but then it's also been turned a little bit along its z-axis. So we can kind of see the lines coming down here. And that's going to be a problem. So what is the right way to take a photo? What is the right angle? Well, that angle is going to be perpendicular to the object itself, or in this case, our brick wall. Now, the photo itself might be a little off. We might have it angled to one side or another a little bit, but this is going to be a lot easier to work with inside of Photoshop. Now, another thing that you might get with photos from your camera is you might get a little bit of kind of like this fisheye where it looks like it's bubbled a little bit. So you can see that this line kind of comes up a little and then back down. And then you can see this one down here kind of comes down and then back up. Now, when this happens, this is very easy to fix inside of Photoshop, so we can deal with this. Now that we've talked about the lighting and the angle, let's talk about one extra thing that we want to avoid whenever we're taking our own photos, and that's going to be avoiding any extra details in the image itself. Now, an example of that would be like this leaf image here. Now, you'll notice that we have the right consistency of light, and then we also have the right angle for this. But we have some extra details in here that could be noticeable whenever we tile this across a terrain. So those extra details are going to be this trash here at the top, as well as this metal bar. Now, this trash is going to be very, very noticeable. In fact, it was probably the first thing that you looked at whenever this image was brought up here. So we don't want this to be tiled throughout our terrain, so what we would have to do is work with it a little bit by trying to cover this up. And we'll actually talk about how to do this later on in this course with this exact image. Alright, so just to recap, some things that we need to make sure of. Whenever we're taking our own photos, we need to make sure that we have a consistent lighting, that we have the right angle in which we're shooting our image, and that's going to be perpendicular to the surface. And then we want to make sure that we're avoiding any extra detail in the image. So with those basic concepts out of the way for taking our own photos, we'll want to jump into creating our first seamless texture in the next lesson.